Welcome to the Socket podcast. This week, we are joined by one of my dear friends and mentors, Nicki Anderson. Nicki and I met about 15 years ago. She came to give a presentation at the Young Professionals group through the Naperville Chamber. And she was such an inspiration, and I instantly looked up to her. And I think I may have tracked her down afterwards and made her be friends with me. I think that's how that turned out. 15 years later, she's just one of my best friends, and I cannot imagine my life without her. So welcome, Nicki.
Thanks, Kathy. That's so kind. Where does 15 years go?
I know. So I was trying to think back today. I'm like, when did I meet her? And it was probably like 2005.
Yeah. I think so.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. And now I have like this distorted view of time with all this COVID thing.
I know.
It's like,
I know.
It seems like, wasn't that like 3 years ago? No, it was 15.
I know there was some meme that came out and said, "Oh my goodness, this week has been such a long year." Right in the beginning when we kind of went into the lockdown time. So I get it. Time's a wacky thing.
Yep, it is. It is.
Nicki, can you share with our listeners a little bit about your background?
Sure. Let's see. I am I think one of the reasons that we get along is we are both very passionate just about life, right? Mm-hmm. The eternal optimist that's always looking for opportunities to make positive change.
Yep.
And so I owned a business for a little over 20 years, and it was my first venture into not only entrepreneurship and owning a business, but making a difference. And so I went into the industry with the dream of leveling the field for everybody and not making it a industry that's just for fit people, but an industry that's for people that want to have a path to learn about themselves and their body and how to be well, right? Not thin, you know my passion about all of that. Sure. I spent a lot of time and the pushback on that was, oh, it's not sparkly and cool. You just want people to be healthy. That's so boring. So I wrote a book in 2000 called Reality Fitness.
I have it.
There it is. Wait, there it is. And it was really about finding yourself through good health. And I lectured all over the world actually on starting a small business and marketing it, a fitness business. When I got into it, it was pretty male dominated. I was one of the very few women that lectured at the conferences because it had been a male dominated industry for so long. But around the time I came in, women were starting to open up yoga studios and Pilates studios and leaving the group fitness instructor world and opening up their own businesses, which is really cool. So I had a great opportunity to work with aspiring entrepreneurs. And then around 2012, I said, I think I've done all I can do here. Mm-hmm. And then left the industry. I was ready. It was going in a direction I didn't like. And I thought, it's time to move on. And then around 2013, someone reached out and said, hey, the chamber is about to lose their CEO. What do you think? And I'm like, no. And as you well know, I think what drew me in was I knew what a vital role the chamber played in my progress as an entrepreneur and a professional, that I thought, well, maybe this is an opportunity for me to give back and make a difference, right? And I was very passionate about that. So I took the role on, first woman in its 112-year history at the time. Yeah. And spent 5.5 years there, and we made a difference. I think, I had an opportunity to have a positive impact, and my commitment when I started there, and I knew I wouldn't stay, forever, was that I want to leave it better than I found it, because that's what businesses deserve. And it took me about 5.5 years to be able to walk away and look back and say, yeah, I'm really proud of the work that I did. And then Benedictine University reached out to me probably about a year ago and said, we really would like someone to come in and develop a leadership program for our undergraduate women. Would you be interested? And long story short, I accepted and started January 6th, but before COVID. So that's kind of my story. I have 4 grown children and 2 grandchildren and a husband of 35 years. So yeah, life is good.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I've obviously known you through those now 3 careers.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's been so impressive to me is watching you. I'm going to say, I don't mean to sound like dramatic or cheesy, but like come into your own. And I've seen your confidence grow with each step and your ability to tackle new challenges and believe in yourself and set boundaries. And if any of you were to, if you're listening just on audio, if anyone was looking at Nicki, you'd think she's 35, but she is getting close to the 60 point in her life. And so one of the things we want to talk about today was kind of the changes through the decades that you've had as a woman and as a business leader, as a mom, as a grandmother, and how you've kind of stepped into yourself, how you've found your passion and where exactly you want to be in life.
Yeah, I think I am very fortunate in that I have always been a really positive person. Even as a kid, I came through a horrific family divorce, and every reason why I could have been negative and blamed the world on every shortcoming I had would have been so easy.
Yeah.
But I think the combination of faith and just good genes, maybe, I don't know. I've always been a pretty optimistic, positive person. And you and I have had this conversation many times. I've chosen that, right? Even when it would have been much easier just to put my head down on a pillow and be done, right? So I think that's the start of it. I always believed too, despite I was raised by a father who didn't believe women should be educated. He thought that they should just do laundry and cook. Isn't that lovely? But in the back of my mind, I always knew that there was more for me. My passion at the time growing up was music and theater. I was a ham. I always put on shows. I loved that. And then you go through your teenage years where people start telling you you can't, and you start believing it. For some I did, others I didn't, which was really fortunate, even though at home I was told you can't, you can't, you can't. So I think I've shared this with you before. I believe that when you're in your 20s, the world is your oyster. Mm-hmm. When you're in your 30s, you don't know it though. When you're in your 30s, you have this opportunity to take advantage of things, but you're kind of in that area where you're either starting a family, mm-hmm. or you're trying to figure out what you want to do next. But women, not being risk takers, don't have the confidence, and they're also really worried about, especially in their 30s, what everybody thinks.
Oh, good God.
That is a time when, oh God, did I say the wrong thing? Or, oh, I'm sorry. Or it's this very, very interesting time. I remember being mm-hmm. in my 30s, and every time I'd say something, of, oh God, did I say the wrong thing? Or, when there was drama going on with other women, and it was weird. It's just this weird time. And then in your 40s, you have the confidence, right? That confidence starts rearing, you just start discovering it, but you don't quite have the wisdom yet. So you're trying to navigate that whole thing, right? And then you get into your 50s and if you're fortunate and have, had opportunities and made good choices, and where that wisdom and that confidence really starts coming together. And all of that stuff, all of that questioning really starts to dissipate, and you naturally start coming into your own because you choose to. Because now I don't have to impress anybody. I'm not banging down doors trying to, make my mark, because I really feel like if you are dedicated and passionate and true and authentic, it just really happens. We spend so much time trying to force ourselves into what we think we should be, when you get to your 50s, you realize it was always there and you just need to be it.
Yeah, gosh, that is such a good point. I know for myself, my goal has to try to be 10 years ahead of that curve. You know, my 30s, I had 2 young kids. I had 3 practices. I went through a divorce, a bankruptcy. I lost my home. I mean, it was like the chapter of my life I don't always want to open up.
Yeah.
And the amount of insecurities I had in myself, with who I was as a person and the decisions I was making and what my body looked like, I just second guessed myself so often. And it pains me to think back to how I used to think about myself back then. You know, the negative things I would say in my head that I just somehow got put on repeat of, you're not good enough, or you know, you're not a good enough mother, or God, you need to lose some weight. But some of these like nasty things that I used to say to myself, I'm 46. Gosh, I keep saying I'm 47. I'm like, I'm giving myself an extra year in there.
I know, I keep saying I'm 38.
And so I am so thankful to, in my 40s, come into not only that confidence, but I think I've intentionally sought out that wisdom from friends like you, and other friends I have, and other mentors and counselors and business coaches, where I'm trying to put that all together so I can get there a decade earlier. And one of the things that I want to do and continue to do with Socket is help women find that confidence for themselves, you know, earlier than their 50s. And I think that can be done with the right tools and the right resources.
It's, you know, that confidence word is so vital for so many reasons. I want to go back just a bit to what you were saying about how we talk to ourselves.
Yeah.
And I always remind women, if you talk to your friends or your family the way you talk to yourself, you would have no friends and your family would hate you. You know, I mean, and honestly, when you're hearing that dialogue, it's like, would I ever say that to anybody else? Then why would I say that to myself? So I just wanted to make that point, because it really is so crucial to get rid of that tape that plays itself over and over again, or to be so quick to judge yourself, right? With not even any compassion or empathy. So I think we need to be really mindful of that. I completely lost track of what I was going to say. Oh, and the other thing too, Kath, I think that's a really good point that you brought up, is that, you know, trying to be 10 years ahead of the curve. And, you know, with the best of intentions, life actually happens exactly as it's supposed to. So I love what you said about, you know, getting bits and pieces here, because I think that when you really do hit that stride, which is what I call it, in your 50s, and you've done that kind of homework, if you will, it just makes it even richer, right? Yeah. Friendships that you've made, the notes, mental notes that you've taken, is really all part of being able to transition into that next phase of life, season of life, whatever you want to call it, with clarity and peace. Yeah. And oh, I know. So, and confidence, right? But even confidence, like that starts happening probably in your 40s or 50s. By the time you get to your 60s, it's like, oh, haven't I always had that? And sadly, we haven't. But that confidence is what prevents women from seeking out the job that they really want, because they don't think they have what it takes. Asking for that raise, taking that class, you know, making decisions simply because they don't have the confidence. That one thing holds women back from so much. And I will tell you, the leadership program that I'm doing, that is my number one focus, because I know women in their 50s that unfortunately still don't have confidence, that are still insecure and still believe what everybody tells them about themselves that's not good, or they're so focused on the external, which I think we'll talk about too, that they really lose sight of being fully engaged in all of that wisdom that they've garnered over the years. They've put a blanket over it and really are limiting themselves. So that confidence, you are spot on. The earlier that we can give that to women, the greater the likelihood of them discovering their success and the opportunities that they deserve.
Yeah, I agree. You talk about, not to harp on confidence, but I do agree. It's such an important topic. I got married when I was 27, and I honestly weighed about 80 or 90 pounds less than I weigh today. And I remember being on my honeymoon, and the memory I remember most from my honeymoon, which is supposed to be this celebration of your marriage and this great vacation, is that I was fat. That in my bikini, my stomach was not perfectly thin. I had lost some weight going into my wedding. I brought my own scale to the hotel to weigh myself the day I got married. And I just think of how freaking wrapped up I was in that number, in that perfection, um, and it destroyed a lot of parts of my life. And now today, I've been heavier. I've been 30 pounds heavier than I am right now. I've wanted to tape videos about life lessons and things that I've learned and try to help people for years. And the reason I haven't done it is because I haven't lost more weight. And that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I think as women kind of process their own lives, trying to separate weight, perfection, whether you're too heavy or you're too thin, or your hair's too curly, your nose is too big, or whatever that looks like physically to you that you beat yourself up about, to separate the fact that you have value, even if this is not exactly where you want it to be, or it's not your favorite thing about you, and to focus your energy and elevate your thought process of, what do I bring to the table? What things do I have value for that have nothing to do with how I look? And I know that you've, helped women in that space. And what have been the things that you've helped them figure out in that concept?
Oh, this could be an entire different show. That was always my push when I was in the health and fitness business, is that it's not about weight. It's really about taking care of your health. Period. That's the most important thing. We are not all meant to look like the cover of the Sports Illustrated. This is something that culturally has been set up for women to question ourselves.
Yeah.
And the longer it goes and the more that these products are created, what has happened is that they create a problem for us, and we think we look to them to solve it. So gray hair, right? Women don't go gray. Like, that just makes that makes you look 10 years older. Well, who the hell am I trying to impress? Right? Like, why? And if I were going to go to get a job and somebody didn't hire me because I have gray hair, it's that double standard that we've set forth. Like, men are silver foxes. Give me a freaking break, right? Men just look so hot when they have gray hair. But we have, over time, created this thing, whether it's gray hair, whether it's weight, whether it's the size of our nose, the size of our boobs, whatever it is, there's been a problem that's been created. It's a problem. Now we need to fix it. And so now we're going to buy all this stuff to fix it, when there was never a problem to begin with, right?
I know.
We are all meant to be a different size. I used to tell women that all the time. We are not all meant to be 5'7" and 140 pounds. We're not. No. We are all different, and that's the beauty. And unfortunately, why is it acceptable and okay to all of us try and look the same and be the same? It's an awful thought, but it's something that's been created and perpetuated so that we feel desperate and insecure, and we got to do something about it. It's not true. It's a lie. And that's kind of what I used to tell women. Who tells you that you're fat? Who tells you that women don't let their hair go gray? Who tells you that you need to have a cute little button nose because that's what's hot, right? I remember as a kid, Kath, putting freckles on my nose with brown marker. Now, I lived in Texas, and I dealt with a little discrimination because everybody thought I was Mexican. So I did everything I could to look as Caucasian as possible. And I used to take a brown marker and put freckles on my nose, put a little powder so it looked like I had freckles, because to me that meant, really blonde hair, blue eyed, right? What was desirable. I never appreciated the fact that I had great thick eyebrows that I used to tweeze like lines, right? The silly things and the things that are created. So I think that confidence goes back to embracing everything you are that makes you different and unique and wonderfully special.
Yeah.
And that is the message we need to start telling our kids. Because when we have girls that are starting to diet as young as 8 years old, 9 years old, or women are getting plastic surgery at 8 for graduation presents, this is a problem.
Yeah.
This is a problem. So, and I could go off on that forever. So I'll stop now.
There's a conversation that we had, which I believe was the lunch that solidified that you and I were going to be lifelong friends. We went to Kiku, which is a sushi place if you don't live around the Napeville area. And we sat in that back room, right, with the fancy chandelier. And you were back there when I walked in. I was like, wow, she got us the fancy room. How did she do that? I thought you were like magical or something. I think you just have to ask for it. But anyway, I was sharing with you a relationship that I had and how upsetting it was to me that the relationship wasn't what I wanted it to be or what I had expected it to be. And as we got further along in the conversation, you said to me, well, how long has this been feeling this way? Or how long has this been going on? I'm like, well, probably 5 or 6 years. And you said, what do you think the chances are that it's going to change on the other person's end? And I was like, very little, unfortunately. And so she's like, well, you have 2 options then. You can continue to set the expectation in your head of what you believed the relationship was going to be, and you can continue to be frustrated that it's not that, or you can reset the expectation for what that relationship is going to be in your life and be happy and thankful for the time that you do have, even if it's more limited than what you thought it was going to be.
Right.
And that was so profound to me. And it changed that relationship for the better, because it took the pressure off of it. Mm-hmm. And it really was my mind creating something that never really was. And
we're good at doing that.
Yeah, right. So, how have you looked at setting expectations and within your own relationships? How have you worked that out through the years?
Expectation is a really tricky word. I try not to have any, to be honest. And that's a really hard thing because every situation we go in, we set expectations. Even unconsciously, we set expectations. And very often we walk away disappointed because we know in our head what it's supposed to be, right? But then it doesn't happen that way. So sometimes I think expectations set us up for disappointments.
For sure.
So I don't know if it's the expectations that I've set in my life that has given me a life that makes me very fulfilled. I think it's simply knowing what I'll say yes to and knowing what I'll say no to. It's valuing me. And if I don't value me and what's important to me and what feeds me, I can't possibly do that for anybody else. So it's really not as much of an expectation in my life as it is how I treat myself, then ultimately allows me to do good things. Because if I'm good to me, I can be good to other people.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of goes right into another topic that I had on my list of things that we might chat about. And that is setting boundaries and saying no. And I've watched you change what you say yes to and how much external events and things that you go to or things that you say yes or no to over the years. And I know I've done that similarly for myself. When you're a doer and when you're a volunteer and when you're a leader in any community, people know you're going to get shit done. And right. So I think we end up getting tapped on the shoulder more often than not, like, oh, there's this new committee forming. Will you head it up? Or, oh, there's this, this charity event that we want you to come to and sit at my table. And some of those opportunities are so wonderful, but at some point they get to be overwhelming and can kind of eat away at the energy that we have for ourselves.
Right.
So how have you found ways to create that balance, if you can ever really have balance, and step away from things that you kind of are like, man, I just really don't want to do that, but I feel a little guilty about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that I'm going to address balance first because I'm very passionate about that. One of my pet peeves is that when I'm sitting on a panel and someone will say, how have you managed work-life balance, raising kids? And I said, here's the thing. No one ever asks a man that question.
Right.
They always ask a woman, right?
Yep.
And I don't believe there is balance, that you are constantly seeking this, utopia of everything's perfect. It does not exist. Balance, and I learned this from Adrienne, who owns Two Bostons, and she said, it's not about balance, it's about integration. And I loved that. You have to integrate differently. Sometimes you have to integrate more work into your family life, and sometimes you have to integrate more family into your work life. And that's really, I think, a realistic, because again, women are doers, women are pleasers. And by the time you get to your 50s, pleasing is not there. It's simply doing the right thing. And that means doing the right thing for everybody. So, in my 30s, I sat at one time on like 9 boards. It was ridiculous. Kath, I did exactly what you did. People, oh, that Nicki Anderson, she's so full of energy, she can get it done. And then I was probably in my latter 30s, and I'm looking around the table, and it's all a bunch of, excuse the expression, old white gray-haired men, right? And I said, they've made their nut. They have nothing else to do. Why am I sitting here? I've got a business to run, partnership with my husband to raise my children. I mean, I don't have time to do this, right? And I was so worried about the people I would disappoint. And at the end of the day, as I know, if I knew then what I know now, is that if I'm disappointing myself, that bleeds into everything else, right? So walking away from those things fed me. It allowed me to be better in the things that mattered to me. And so you just start prioritizing differently, and you get it, and you're not afraid of saying no anymore. When we say no, it is our fear is that people won't think that we're able, right? Or it will, give me, they'll mark me down a little bit in my abilities. So as women, since we're always trying to, show that we're able to do mostly anything, if we say no, that might curtail future opportunities. And then the other thing is, we don't like to disappoint people, but sometimes you do have to disappoint people to do the right thing. And I'm not going to say yes to somebody at the risk of my health, my family, so you just learn. So it's really getting to a point where you start shifting your priorities. And with each phase of life, you shift priorities.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that integration.
I love that.
That's a really good concept. And I know as I've come along through the decades and learned how to say no and set those boundaries, I used to say no and then explain it away in 3 paragraphs, right? So the reason why I can't is this and that, and then this, and then I have this going on, and I'm so sorry. And then if I do that, I can't. I mean, good God. I mean, did anyone even read that, right? Like she said, no, get over it.
They don't care.
They don't care, right?
They don't care.
Let me just move on to someone that can do it for me,
Right.
And so now I have kind of a statement of, I am so sorry, I'm unable to be there, but I hope you have a great event, or I hope that sounds like an awesome opportunity. I hope you're able to find a great speaker that doesn't work with my schedule, or something, just a simple, a thoughtful, kind no, without the thesis behind why I'm unable to do it and why you shouldn't be mad at me and why I shouldn't feel guilty.
Yeah.
It's a lot of weight we carry on us.
I think I've told you this, we've had this discussion before, because one of my favorite examples of exactly that, and I learned this from my job when I had my studio, when women would call to cancel an appointment, here's how it went. Hey, Nicki, this is Janine. I'm so sorry I can't make it. My son has a fever, and, I was thinking about maybe getting a sitter, but then I was worried that maybe I don't want to expose anybody to him. So, if it gets better, I'll come in, but I wasn't. Okay, and this goes on for 3 minutes, right? And after about a minute and a half, I hang up.
Like,
what my male clients, hey, Nick, this is Jack. Can't make it today. See you next week, same time. Click. That's it.
See, there is something we should learn from those men.
So, I think one of the beauties of women is that we are compassionate. We are empathetic. We don't want to let anybody down. But there's also, life happens, And most people are very understanding. You don't need to explain it. And I had somebody working for me, and this was not too long ago, and probably 10 years ago. And she went into a meeting with me and we walked out and she said, you know what you need to do, Nick? And I go, what? She goes, you need to shut up. Well, I hate the word shut up, first of all. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, you talk too much. You just talk, you have to explain everything. That's part of my personality. But it was when we were trying to negotiate something and I kept trying to explain it as if they didn't get it. They got it, shut up and let them say yes. Right? And so I want to be very careful of not trying to squelch my personality that is often enthusiastic, but also understanding that, yes, sometimes I do talk more than is necessary, and just to be aware of it and to be mindful of it, right? But you don't want to get to a point where you're, 2 words in a meeting, right?
There's a balance.
Yeah, without a doubt. So yes, and the I'm sorries, that changes with age as well. The I'm sorry for everything, unless you did some awful act or maimed me in some way, you don't need to say I'm sorry.
That is something that I've worked on as well. There was a comedy skit a couple of years ago, and the whole skit was literally one woman being on a panel with 3 men. And how many times they said, I'm sorry. And some of the times it was like the guy got up and bumped her and she was like, oh, I'm sorry. And then she was like, oh, do you need water? Can I get you something? And it made me laugh out loud because I thought, wow, we really do say I'm sorry so often. I was walking like on the street. This was before COVID, so people kind of passed right by themselves. And literally I walked past this woman and she apologized. Yeah. And I wanted to turn around and say, for what? Being a human being that's taking up a little bit of space in this world that walked by me because we're on a path that you're supposed to walk by each other. Right. So if you pay attention to it, women are really bad at that. And it's this, I'm sorry. So trying to find that space of, what am I sorry for?
Yeah, exactly. Like before you say it, like, okay, what exactly is if you're late, sure, I'm so sorry I'm late, right? It's a respect thing. But if you're walking down the hall, excuse me, right? Yes. But and I can't think of a great example off the top, but it's usually, if you want to sit down next to somebody and they're like, oh, I'm sorry. It's like, no, I'm in your way. You weren't in my way. Right. And so again, it goes back to part of what makes women really great leaders. And that is that we're very authentic. We're very compassionate. We're very, empathetic. Those traits sometimes spill over into things like that.
Mm-hmm. I know when you talk about being authentic, I'm going to consider it, some people I think would consider it an oversharer, right? As things in my life have unfolded, I've been through many, many ups and downs, and I've always been pretty open and honest about it. And I remember, and I said this on one of our other podcast episodes, that at some point people were reaching out to me saying, you really shouldn't share this personal information. What I found is when I do, the feedback I get is that people need to hear it. People need to understand that what they might think of as Cathy Suber or Nicki Anderson or other leaders in our community, like life isn't always perfect. And that we do go through struggles, even though we normally put out the positive stuff, because like you said, we're both, optimistic women, and most of what's going to come out of our mouth on social media or that other people can see is going to be that positive, highlight reel. But I think raising your hand and sharing some of the struggles that you go through can really help people feel like, okay, she's going through this. Well, I'm going through it too. And somehow it makes them feel a little bit better, like they're not all out by themselves, out there by themselves, being the only person to go through something.
Right. I agree. And, I think that's also the challenge with social media. And, everybody's life's perfect on social media. Mm-hmm. And I think when those that are willing to share that it ain't all sunshine, lollipops, and roses, I think is a welcome reprieve for people that are on social media, and a reminder that life is never 100% grand all the time, right? And so I think for your audience and the people that follow you, I think you give them that dose of reality that it's not always great, and I work really hard. And I remember you did a project, and forgive me, I can't remember the name of the project, but I remember you taking a picture of the inside of your car, and I was like, that is probably the best thing you can do for women, like that probably look at you and think your house is perfect, your car is perfect, and oh my gosh, right? And that was, I loved that. Talk about authentic.
Yeah, well, it was funny, in another episode, we talked about that, and the Naperville Sun ran that picture. And when they asked to do a story, it was called the Journey of Motherhood Project.
Yeah.
When they asked to run a story, I was like, oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it'd be great for you to do that. Well, and they asked for a picture, and we'd only done my picture. And so I thought it was going to be, yay big. It was yay. It was like 1/2 of the newspaper. But I had multiple people come to me and say, thank you so much, because I showed it to my husband, or I said to myself, oh, all right, well, Cathy's car looks like that too. Maybe I should stop feeling so freaking bad about myself.
Right.
We can't be everything to all people and have every part of our life going in the right direction and perfect at every step of eternity. It's impossible.
Right. We cannot be perfect, nor should we accept perfect, not only from ourselves, but for other people too, right? We trip, stumble, and fall, and other people trip, stumble, and fall. And I think, now there's probably more conversation around, women really supporting other women, because even, 20 years ago, when I was in the health and fitness industry, I mean, there are some not nice women, right? That are in the industry that, you feel like you're back in 5th grade again. When I started my business, I lost a lot of friends. I would walk to school to get my kids, and they'd all be in a circle and kind of give me the, the side eye, and don't even think about coming over and talking to us. So women, can be very, very cruel. I think, I can speak for myself that I have seen more and more, and perhaps it's the people that I hang around, but I see more and more women supporting each other. That could be because more opportunities are available for women, so it's not so much of a dog-eat-dog kind of world. I don't think so. I think women are realizing that the only way that we're going to bridge that gap is by supporting each other. Even if it means that we don't get that raise that she does, it's okay, because it's still representing more women in leadership roles that we so desperately need to see.
Well, I couldn't agree more. It makes me think about after I went through my divorce, we had a group of friends that would go out to dinner, every 2 months, and there was maybe 6 couples, and we were the only divorced people, and so I was the only single person, and I didn't realize it. I didn't realize what had happened until my other friend went through a divorce a few years later, and she called me up and she was crying. And I was like, "What's wrong?" And she goes, "We stopped inviting you, didn't we?" And I went, "What? What do you mean?" She said, "Out to dinner. We stopped inviting you, right?" I was like, "Yeah." And because as soon as I got divorced, when the couples got together, I was no longer a couple, and it kind of threw off the balance or caused fear. Who knows what actually
women start getting jealous.
And so when she went through the divorce, she had a group of friends, and kind of the same thing happened to her. And she found out that people were going out to dinner, and she apologized to me. Yeah. And I was like, "Thank you." I said, I guess I understood, but looking back, I can understand that I wouldn't want to do that. So now when I have people in my life that either go through a divorce or I know are kind of feeling like they're tackling life by themselves, I try to make sure I'm reaching out. Through COVID, I wanted to reach out to my single friends that live by themselves. I have the awesome opportunity to be in shutdown with a man I love and children that I love. And so I had hugs, I had physical contact, I had conversation, but for someone living on their own, that added a component to this issue that we all were facing together that was really significant.
Yeah, and you bring up such a good point, and that is for our friends who don't have children.
Yeah.
And always being mindful about conversation. And I'm super sensitive because I have two older sisters and they don't have any children. And you know how we always assume that women have kids. And very recently, oh, I think it was at Refuel when that comedian said, if you don't know me well enough to know if I have children or not, you shouldn't be asking me if I have children. And I was like, that is so true, right?
Because you don't
And
know.
sometimes I think we forget, like if we're in a circle of women and everybody's talking about kids and there's that one person, I'm always so mindful of that because there are a million other things to talk about. Obviously, for those of us with kids, the kids are our highlight. But I also encourage women to remember those that don't have children, to find ways to include them in the conversation and not make it just about kids.
Yeah, for sure. And always just to be mindful of what others might be going through, or, some of them may have had a baby and lost a baby, or, every once in a while I've said something and just stuck my foot in my mouth and afterwards realized, oh man. And, a quick thing about that, I always am the first person to reach out and apologize if I feel like I've offended someone. I try not to swing the pendulum too far that direction. I mean, at some point you could be offensive to almost anyone with anything you say, but there've been a couple times where I knew I did something wrong. I know that my actions, even though I wasn't intentional about it, might have upset someone. So I'm the first, again, raise my hand and run to that person and say, I am so sorry. I said this at dinner last night, or, this happened, and make sure that I take ownership for anything that I believe I've done that I'm not proud of.
Right. And oftentimes if we, when we do take that step to apologize, I'm always interested in them going, I don't even remember that.
I know.
Or I didn't take offense to that, right? But how much they appreciate the fact that it was on our mind and we were thinking about it, and then we did take that step to say, hey, in my mind that didn't come off right, and I didn't mean it the way. And 9 times out of 10 people will go, appreciate you saying something. And if they did take offense, they appreciate you saying something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's, yeah.
So I have one more question for you.
Okay.
You have a amazing daughter that I'm lucky enough to know. What are the things, what are maybe 2 things that you feel like are the most important life lessons that you have shared with her that you believe will help her navigate the world around us as a young woman?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, Kath, is walk the talk, right? Children observe everything you do. And you can tell them or give them all the advice that you want, but if you're not living it and doing it, it's moot.
Yep.
So I would say being very mindful that my actions speak louder than words, that she sees the things that I do and that inspires her, being able to stand up for myself, or to, take the bull by the horns and start my own business, even though I didn't have any business background or anything, right? Taking those leaps of faith. And I think that's really the sole thing, is just living your life, through your action, because that does speak louder than words.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I always enjoy our chats, whether it's outside by your beautiful garden or over Zoom for a podcast. Through the years, your wisdom and knowledge and kindness, and you're just such a genuine human being, and I really appreciate you.
Well, it's mutual, my dear. And thank you so much for having me on this program. I look forward to seeing what you do with it, because I think there's a lot of great conversations to be had. And if anybody's going to do the job at telling them, you'll be the one. So thanks for including me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And to all of you, thank you for listening to the Socket podcast. And we'll be back next week. Have a great day. Bye.